So, tonight is a PDO event. What does that mean? Personal devices off. If you have a cell phone, please, unless you're expecting an emergency call because your uncle's in the hospital or your dog's in the hospital, please turn it off, or on, at least on airplane mode. I have gotten the lovely Corey to turn off the Wi-Fi, and we turned off the cordless phone that was at the front of the institution so that I'm not exposed during the evening, because I live in my home in a wireless-free environment. And it's free of all kinds of other things that you're going to hear about tonight, and that's what I do. I get people free of all of this electromagnetic pollution. So I did practice as a chiropractor and naturopath in Ontario for 30 years. I saw some 15,000, 16,000 new patients during that time. I did over 1 million treatments. After 30 years, I wore out. I got throat cancer and almost died. So I decided I'd do something else. So the reason we have a legal disclaimer up here is so that you know I'm not here to diagnose you or recommend any treatments. What I'm here to do is to educate you so you understand what this is, what this invisible problem is all about, and why, as Kevin said, so many people are getting sick and they don't know why. So, how does new information come about? Well, number one, first it is ridiculed, and I get lots of ridicule. People think I'm a whack job, okay? And anyone who brings forth new information gets that kind of ridicule at first, okay? I mean, at the end of World War II, most of the doctors in North America smoked. Some of you might remember those times. And the cigarettes that your doctor smoked, those were the ones that you wanted to smoke, because they were probably the best cigarettes to smoke. Now we know different. Okay? Then it is violently opposed, and we are right now in the violently opposed phase to some degree in regards to electromagnetic pollution. Because the largest industry on the planet right now, does anyone know what it is? Is it big pharma? Is it oil? Is it cars? No, it's telecom. They have now become the largest industry on the planet. Bigger than anything, and actually by far. Does anyone know how many cell phones we have on the planet Earth right now? Well, somewhere between 4 and 5 billion.
Here's one of them.
And here's one of them. Yes, well, I have one over there. It's off, because it's off almost all the time. Then it is accepted as a matter of course. So ultimately, you will be able to look back at tonight and you'll say, oh yeah, I remember I went to a presentation by this guy and he was saying this, and now they're actually banning cell phones and going back to wired hookups for computers. And that's a few years away, but it will happen, mark my words, it will happen. But right now we are in the violently opposed phase. And so I'm here to let you know that perhaps you might want to be violently opposed to something, maybe just in your mind, but it's something to think about. So this is me, practiced for a long time in Ontario, 30 years. I also got my osteopathic degree here a couple of years ago just to keep my head in shape studying. I started doing this kind of work in the late 80s with archaic meters, which I actually still have at home. Now I have upgraded state-of-the-art meters for all of this work. And I started working with patients who, for some reason, weren't responding to my care. Because when you came to my clinic, you got better. That was the deal. We found out what was wrong with you, and we worked with you, and we kept sorting it out until you got better. And if somebody wasn't responding in a few weeks to my treatment, it was like, something's not right here. So started looking at electromagnetics in people's homes, and I would go into their homes, and I would sit down and do an inspection. I had meters at the time, and I used other techniques to find out where the problems were in that home. And this is before cell phones. Cell phones didn't really come into, real big deal until the late 90s. So the late 80s, we were dealing with electromagnetic pollution, magnetic fields, electric fields, dirty electricity, that sort of thing. Unless somebody lived near like a television station, that might be a problem, but we weren't even dealing with cell towers back then. These were just electromagnetic problems. So I have now, more recently, started up an actual business, and I'm the only person really in the Okanagan doing this. There are other people that do come into the Okanagan on occasion, but I'm the only person that actually lives here that has this as an active service for people. So a little bit about me. I'm the first patient in Canada to go home from low back surgery the same day. I had a disc operated on in my low back in 1998, and I went home the same day of the surgery. They'd never heard of that. And when I asked to go home, they said, "You're crazy." And I said, "Well, I don't want to eat your food, and I can stand, walk, and pee, so why would I stay here?" And they went and got the doctor. He came in, checked me over, and he said, "You can go home." And so I did. I went home the same day of the low back surgery. Had throat cancer in 2005. Was it caused by cell phones and other forms of electromagnetic radiation? I cannot say. I do know that I was using a cell phone at the time, and I was using it a fair bit. I had other things happen to me in 2004 that I'm quite sure were causal factors in the throat cancer that I had. But I managed to beat throat cancer. That's an extremely deadly one, and I managed to beat it without medical treatment. They don't like that. So I was 9 years cancer-free this last July 9th. Thank you very much. I am 62. At 57, I had a cataract done in this eye. Does anyone find that a little bit young? Cell phones cause cataracts. I now have a cataract in this eye. This eye went first because I only used the cell phone on this side. I can't use it on this side because this ear is blown out from too much loud music. So, electromagnetic fields have always existed in nature. They are a direct current DC frequency between 0 and 100 cycles per second. We might get a little technical here, but most people can understand this. A cycle is like this, and the current that runs in our walls runs at 60 cycles per second, and always has in North America. Does anyone here know what frequency it runs in Europe? 50. Okay, and this all goes back to the early 1900s and guys like Tesla and Edison and all the guys that came up with all of this wonderful electrification that we have now. But we are designed for very low frequencies. For instance, our brain works at between 40 and 30 cycles per second. Our brain waves, if you put yourself on an EEG machine and look at your brain waves, that's the frequencies that you're running at. Your heart runs at between 1 and 2 beats per minute, unless you have a very bad condition, sometimes caused by electromagnetics, okay, where the heart races a lot. And that can be very, very serious. Our pineal gland in our brain that creates the hormone that allows us to sleep. And we'll talk more about that in a little while because that's a very important thing in regards to what we're talking about tonight. But our pineal gland runs at 10 cycles per second. These are very low, gentle frequencies. And our Earth actually vibrates at around 7.8 cycles per second. Actually, that vibration has gone up recently because our planet is changing its magnetics and all kinds of other things. But the frequencies that all of these gadgets run on are very, very, very high frequencies. You've heard of megahertz, gigahertz. Most people don't know what that means, but a megahertz is 1,000,000 cycles per second. A gigahertz is 1,000,000,000 cycles per second. These are extremely high frequencies that these gadgets run on, that our bodies and our minds and our nervous systems have never ever been exposed to before. So this is called the electromagnetic spectrum. And the spectrum is basically this wide, wide range of energies that go all the way from, extremely high to extremely low, and we can only perceive a very few of them. Like you probably have noticed that my shirt is green. I hope by now you have, because I love this shirt. It's my favorite shirt. Green is a color of visible light, and visible light that we see, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, okay? Those are colors in the electromagnetic spectrum that our eyes can actually perceive. Is there anyone in here who can perceive or sense radio frequency? It's called radio frequency because it's at a frequency that's much higher than what we can see. There are people that can actually feel it in their bodies. And these are people who are what we call electromagnetic sensitives, or EHS. We say suffering from EHS. But these are people who have developed a sensitivity to this energy and cannot exist in the normal society. Okay, and if you were here earlier, okay, you saw me get out my meter, and I went in the back room, and Ryan and I turned off the cordless phone because it was going crazy on the meter. We're going to show you that in a little while. Okay, and we also found the Wi-Fi, which was up top over there with the two little antennas on it, and it was blasting out a signal. So we were all being bombarded by this radio frequency stuff in the room. And because I'm sensitive to it, I didn't feel that great. And I could tell, so that's why I turned on my meter and sorted that out before the presentation. And they'll turn that on after we leave. So, you know, these things are everywhere. And the problem is we can't see them. But almost everybody can feel them if they pay attention. And that's the key. And that's one of the things I do when I do a home inspection, is I show people what it feels like not to have this stuff operating in their home. So this electromagnetic spectrum is very, very important, and it's a big study. We could spend, you know, a couple hours just studying it. It's a big deal. And if you're really interested, get on the internet if you can and read about the electromagnetic spectrum. It's fascinating, and it's very important that we understand a little bit about this. Okay? So the big question I had was, how did we get all of this electromagnetic pollution going on? How did we get here? From 100 years ago, there was almost nothing. And all of a sudden, in 100 years, which is just that long in the sequence of time, how did we get here? Well, it's all about the dollar sign, actually, but I blame it on this guy. Does anyone know who he is?
John McCain.
That's John McCain. He ran for president. I don't know if you know that John McCain had cancer on the side of his face, and he's had it surgically removed 4 times now. Yes. That's the old cell phone from back in the early 90s. I don't know if anyone ever had one of those. They used to call it the brick. And does anyone know who this is?
Sheryl Crow.
If you know popular music, you've heard about Sheryl Crow. Okay, Sheryl Crow had a brain tumor that she blames on her cell phone, because strangely enough, this is a picture of when she actually used a cell phone. Okay, and where was the brain tumor? Right underneath where that cell phone is. And she's quite sure that is, but of course nobody can prove these things. And that's one of the issues that we have with this whole thing. So let's talk about electro-pollution. What is it? Where is it? How it's created? And we're going to give you some solutions, some things that you can do to protect yourselves, because it's our duty to protect ourselves. I just don't think the government's going to do that for us. Does anyone in here think the government's going to protect us from this stuff? No, I don't think so either. So we're talking about a number of different components to radio frequency pollution. These all are part of that spectrum I talked about, okay? So we've got radio frequency radiation, which is the cell phones and the cell towers, television, radio stations, Wi-Fi, things like baby monitors, cordless phones. Cordless phones are actually quite nasty, and we'll show you that in just a couple of minutes. We're going to do some demonstrations. Magnetic fields. Alternating current, which is what we have running in the wires in everybody's home, okay, produce magnetic fields. And the reason they produce magnetic fields is because it is alternating current, so it's vibrating at that 60 cycles per second. So we get magnetic energy coming out of those wires that penetrates out into the room. This is why people that sleep in a bed and there's an electric plug right by their head, they frequently get quite ill. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Electrical fields are very similar to magnetic fields, and they go hand in hand. Electric fields are a little more damaging to us It's actually electricity passing through the air into our bodies. And one of the things we do in an inspection is, we have people lay on their bed where they sleep, and we measure how much electricity is actually passing through them from the walls, coming through the air, and going into their bodies. And we can actually see how dramatic it is when that electricity is cut off. Does anyone remember what it's like in a power failure in their home?
Calm.
How peaceful it is? Almost everybody, when I ask that question, they haven't thought about it. When they think about it, they go, yeah. Now that you mention it, it's really calm and peaceful when there's a power failure. So one of the things I had my patients do many, many years ago, starting in the late 80s, was to go home at night, put the family in the living room, put some candles around, and have mom or dad go down and turn off the main breaker to the house. Shut off all the hydro, sit for an hour and see what it's like in that house with no hydro running in the walls. And most people would do it because they thought I was just crazy enough they maybe should believe me. Okay? When you're a naturopath, you have the liberty to be a little crazy. So the ones that actually did it came back and they all said the same thing. It's profoundly calm and peaceful, and it just feels so good when there's no hydro in the walls. Okay? And what happens when we go camping? Not an RV camping that's plugged in. I'm talking tents. Sleeping on the ground. Yeah, you're on an air mattress, but sleeping on the ground. Okay, does anyone go camping here? We do? What does it feel like?
Slept under trees most of my life.
There you go. Okay? But you sleep in a house though sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. With the power on.
Absolutely.
Okay. And is there a difference? Do you notice it when you go camping?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
Not to the extent you're talking, no.
All right.
I mean, there's a feeling
Yeah.
that's phenomenal when you're disconnected from the world.
Okay. That's what I'm after.
Yeah.
Part of that is being disconnected from the grid.
Yeah.
It really is. Okay. Dirty electricity is a very, very important concept here, because the electricity flowing in our walls is no longer the electricity we had when I was a kid, or when you guys were kids. Okay? It's different now because we have a gazillion gadgets with little power supplies, little things you plug in to charge up this and charge up that. Okay? And now all of our smart meters, they've got a power supply. All of those power supplies produce dirty electricity. It's no longer that clean 60-cycle signal that we once had many, many years ago that electricity was designed for. So all of this dirty electricity flows on our wires. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about light vibrational smog. You know what a light bulb is. Everybody knows what a light bulb is, and basically that that there's an electric current that runs through the thing in the light bulb that makes it glow and creates light. Okay? And we know that it runs off the current in the walls, so it must somehow run on 60 cycles like everything else. Okay? Yeah, it's vibrating. Sometimes you can see it vibrating. Yeah. And fluorescent lights, if you do this with your hand, you can actually see, you get a number of different images because it's actually flickering at 60 cycles per second. Okay? But we weren't designed for this. We were designed for candles and campfires and sunlight and lanterns that are a constant glowing flame. Now we have what's called artificial light. And artificial light has actually caused a lot of health problems, especially with the nervous system. So electromagnetic radiation is a public concern, and we're going to talk a little later about safety standards, government safety standards. And our government safety standards here in Canada are rather interesting because they have nothing to do really with the actual safe levels of all of these things that we're talking about. They aren't safe. And the scientific evidence proving this is absolutely concrete now. So the problem with all of this is that it's cumulative. Okay? It's like smoking. You start smoking, you don't get sick in the first 5 years. Might take 10, might take 15, 20. I know people that smoked for 45 years before they got sick from smoking. In fact, my sweetie's brother has been smoking since he was 18, and he smokes 3 packs a day. And I think he's 56. Okay, and he's got that nasty smoker's cough, but eventually it's probably going to get him. Because he's starting to show signs of some fairly serious things, and he's aging very, very rapidly. The problem with electromagnetic radiation is that it is cumulative. It's the longer you're exposed, the more sick you get. And you don't know. And the problem is nobody's connecting the dots on this and saying that person's brain tumor is because they talked on the cell phone for 5 hours a day. And it drives me crazy because I walk around Kelowna and I see people all day long walking down the street like this. And they talk on it for hours on end. So we are now the largest human experiment in history. The only problem is the results of this experiment are probably not going to turn out to be too good. There are places on the planet where they are listening, where they are actually reading the scientific evidence, and they are saying, we need to use some smarts here and use the precautionary principle. So if you don't want your kids to be a science experiment, then hopefully tonight you'll learn something about that, because we are all, right now, frogs in the pot, and the heat is on. And it's coming from a lot of different forms of electromagnetic pollution. And yep, there's a similarity between cell phones and cigarettes, not just in shape. They have all kinds of biological impacts on people. Central nervous system, we're looking at altered brainwave patterns, cognitive function is altered, melatonin, that's that hormone that you need to sleep properly, is altered by cell phones. If you use a cell phone in the evening, most people can't sleep properly. And sleep is sacred. If you aren't sleeping well, you're in serious trouble. Heart. The heart is run by 2 little neurological brains. One is in your neck, and the other one is right next to the heart. And these 2 little neurological brains that operate your heart, they control blood pressure, they control heart rate, they control all kinds of things with this amazing muscle that we have in here that pumps blood for our whole lives and never stops. Okay, the heart is affected, and that's one of the challenges that people are running into. They're having arrhythmias, they're having blood pressure problems. In fact, they've shown that 5 minutes on a cell phone, your blood pressure will go up 10 points from just being on a cell phone for 5 minutes. Other symptoms, fatigue, burning in the ears, headaches, ringing in the ears. Mine's gotten worse lately. I've had ringing in the ears since I was 12 years old from an overdose of penicillin, and it's getting worse lately because I'm pretty sure it's because I live in West Kelowna, and even though where we live the cell radiation is very low, we still have it coming in the house. So I'm working right now on the place we live in to limit that radiation. And the real reproductive system, not just the male reproductive system, but the female reproductive system is also affected by all of these energies. And we now have an epidemic of birth defects. We now have a major problem with infertility. We have a whole new branch of medicine called fertility medicine that didn't exist 30 years ago. It did not exist because people, they made love, they created a child. It wasn't a big deal. Now, it's a really big deal. And it can cost a lot of money to get pregnant. Prenatal exposure to wireless transmitting devices damages rat brains and behavior as well as the testes. This is a series of published studies from research teams in 2013, and this is absolutely concrete science. The problem is, where do most young men carry their cell phones? right there. How far from the reproductive organs? 2 inches. And proximity is everything. How close you are to the cell phone. This isn't a cell phone, by the way. This is my remote. It's just my prop.
Laptops as well, on the lap.
Exactly. People have the laptops, and then now we have tablets. Tablets at least aren't held here. At least they're held here. But do you think the tablet, which is almost always wireless, okay, especially if it's Apple or if it's an Android tablet, do you think the tablet knows where the Wi-Fi router is in the house? No. It blasts out its signal everywhere. And some of that signal goes to the Wi-Fi router, and that's the communication. But it's blasting you in the face, it's hitting you everywhere. Your whole body is being irradiated when you are using a tablet. Same with a cell phone. The cell phone doesn't know where the tower is. It's blasting out everywhere. And the big challenge with the cell phone is that if you don't have a strong signal, guess what the cell phone does? It ramps up its power. And it fries your brain faster. Because now it has to push its signal further because it's further from a cell tower. So if that cell tower is a long ways away and you just got one little bar on your cell phone, okay, that's when you don't want to use your cell phone. If you still have that. And there are a lot of conflicting conclusions about all of this because industry, unfortunately, telecom, they pay their scientists. And their scientists only get paid if they come up with the correct conclusions about what the telecom company wants them to find. So this is the unfortunate part, but we now have thousands of scientists who have realized how horrifically damaging all of this stuff is to us. And so we've got a major problem because this is going on by the countless millions of teenagers who sleep with their cell phones. They've got to be able to get a text at 2 in the morning if their friend freaks out. Okay? And this is affecting them in a very, very serious way. And a lot of people are majorly hooked up to their cell phones. They can't live without them. They've got their whole life in a cell phone. And if people lose their cell phones / smartphones, a lot of them go absolutely crazy. They've done some studies and taken them away from people. They go through withdrawal, and they actually can get to the point of, losing it. Because their whole life is in this little device. And yeah, everybody's got one. I went to New York City about 4 years ago, Manhattan. And New York City is 14 million people. And every single person was walking around like this, around the city. Headphones on, texting, listening, talking on the phone. It was really quite incredible. The amount of electromagnetic pollution in New York was so powerful, I had to get out after 3 days. I couldn't handle it. And you see this all the time. The kids, they're not talking. They're on their phones. Look at this. I see this all the time. Restaurants, 4 people around a table. What are they doing? They're all texting. U.S. children who own mobile phones from 2005 to 2009. It's pretty amazing how many, we're looking at 80.5% of the 10 to 11-year-olds, and actually that was now 6 years ago. So it's actually higher than that. In 2007, I chaperoned a dance in Vernon for 5 to 13-year-olds, and we had to check their backpacks for weapons. I know that sounds bizarre, but that's what we were checking for. We didn't find any weapons, but I calculated in my head as we checked the kids, 85% of these kids had cell phones with them. Now that might be mom and dad's cell phone, just, Junior, take the phone, if you have a problem, call home. But we were quite astounded that many had that many. So Canada is 14th in penetration. It's just behind the US. There are quite a number of countries with more penetration of cell phones into the population than us. I was quite amazed to see that. And it's the girls who actually have more phones than the boys. Anyone know why?
Let's talk.
They're the communicators. That's right. The unfortunate thing is that we are now seeing breast cancer in incredibly young women. And guess where it is? Because guess where they put their cell phone when it's not being used? They even make brassieres with a cell phone pocket built into the brassiere above the left breast. And this is where they're getting breast cancer. In fact, some of them, the cancer is in the shape of the cell phone.
Wow.
Yes, and there are actual pictures like that. And yes, it's not just boys and girls who use cell phones. And seriously folks, the percentage of drivers that use cell phones while driving is highest in Alberta. I see. Yes, that's Alberta. And this is the epitome of driving with a cell phone. However, I've actually seen this in BC twice. Once it was a guy on a bicycle, and the other time it was a guy on a motorcycle. And is she dangerous? And it's not just she, I've seen guys do this. I have passed by cars and looked over, and there's somebody doing exactly this, drinking a coffee, eating, and talking on a cell phone. This is the book you want to read. We are actually working at getting these and making them available so that you can actually buy them when I do a presentation. Disconnect is a phenomenal book. I could not put it down. It's about the cell phone issue. It's written by Dr. Deborah Davis. She has testified before Congress in the United States. She just presented at a symposium at Women's College Hospital in Toronto that was on September 12th. And I would have liked to have gone, but it was only one day, and flying out there for one day was a little bit much. And I want you to observe, this is the remarkable use of a cell phone, and I want you to look at the area of his head around the antenna. This is not a touched up picture. This is for real. Okay? And observe the blood vessels, the lack of hair around the actual area where the antenna is. Is he still alive? I don't know, but I have a sneaky suspicion probably not. Because this is what you look like when you've had a cell phone tumor removed. And it ain't a pretty picture. And I had a number of patients go this route in the late 90s, early 2000s. The number of brain tumors, 120 different kinds, 612,000 people in the US. That's better. In the US are living with a diagnosis of central nervous system and primary brain tumors. We now have between 13 and 15 times the number of brain tumors and brain cancers that we had 20 years ago. Ask any neurologist or neurosurgeon what's going on, and they will tell you exactly the same thing. They will say it's the cell phones. So, you think there's a link? I want you to do your own research. Once you get home, if you have the internet, get on the internet and check it out. The American Academy of Pediatrics in 2013 sent recommendations to the U.S. Federal Communications Commission to adopt standards that protect children's health and well-being and reflect current use patterns. Has not been assessed since 1996 when 44 million people had mobile phones. It is now over 300 million in the United States alone. And there are whole countries where they have no landlines. They only have cell phones. And there is now an initiative by all of the major telephone companies to completely get rid of landlines and only have wireless. So, that would not be good. However, we need to stop it. Children's use of cell phones. In 2000, the United Kingdom independent report recommendations to restrict cell phone use for children under 16. No handheld or hands-free phones to be used while driving. All I can say to that is, duh. 2001, German government reviewed science on cell phone dangers and state parents should keep their children as far away from this technology as possible. 2002, the French government added restrictions for pregnant women to use an earpiece and for teenagers to keep cell phones away from their developing sex organs. That might be a good idea. 2009, Sweden recognizes electrohypersensitivity, a condition linked to cell phone exposure, as a functional impairment that entitles citizens to claim for compensation for this debilitating environmentally induced health problem. That is on the way here. It is probably a few years away, because if that happens here, as it did in 2009 in Sweden, we are going to have a major challenge for our healthcare system and for the health insurance system. Because right now, you have millions of people suffering from this in Canada. Not thousands, millions. And so there will be a lot of resistance by the establishment to actually, it's like chronic fatigue syndrome. I was seeing patients with chronic fatigue syndrome in the 80s, and it was never recognized by the medical profession until long, long after that. And now, your medical doctor will say, oh, you have chronic fatigue syndrome. Child brains are far more at risk than adult brains because of the penetration of the cell phone radiation into the brain. A child's skull is much thinner, it's more delicate, and consequently they are much more at risk than we are. And now we have wireless child toys that are being sold that kids can play with. Well, where is this toy being played with? And what happens when this little guy decides to try and reproduce when he's 28 or 30 or whatever, whenever? And isn't she happy? She got a cell phone. How to protect your family? France, Finland, Israel, and European Environmental Agency advise cell phone precautions. Use a speakerphone. Hold it out here, you get way less radiation. Is it still okay? No, but you get way less radiation than holding it here. Use earpieces if you can, especially the air earpieces that are available. They're expensive, you have to get them off the internet, but they transmit the sound through air instead of through a wire, because when you plug a normal one into your ear, there's a little electromagnetic wave that comes off of that. It's not as bad as holding the cell phone, but it's still a problem. Do not keep the phone in a pocket or on your body ever while it is on, period. It fires off every 13 to 15 seconds to tell the cell tower it's here. And that blast is significant. I've measured it with my equipment. Avoid use in areas of weak signal. We already covered that. If the phone puts out a much stronger signal. Protect abdomens, pregnant, adolescent, and men who wish to become fathers. My prediction is that we now have a whole generation of men who will not be able to conceive children. And if they can conceive, the level of birth defects and challenges and immune system problems with those children is going to be quite nasty. I'm convinced that cell phones cause brain tumors. So now, whenever my phone rings, I let my assistant get it. Funny but not. Funny but not. Risk of acoustic neuromas. Acoustic neuroma is a tumor that grows on the nerve that transmits the signals from your ear to your brain so that you can actually hear. The acoustic neuroma has gone up dramatically, okay? And it goes up with use. So if you use a cell phone for a couple of years, you're probably not at risk. But you get over 10 years or greater than 15 years, and you now have almost 300% more risk of developing one of these tumors. And the biggest problem is that about 80% of the people that have this tumor removed surgically have complete paralysis of one side of the face. How do I know that? I've done the research, and I had patients that had this done because they used a cell phone for extreme long periods of time, and 5, 6, 7 hours a day in their jobs. And a number of them got acoustic neuromas on the side that the cell phone was used on. Glioma is a brain cancer, and once again, it increases with the amount of time you have been using the phone. The risk goes up and up and up. And the problem is that people don't stop using their phones. They just keep going. Unless they get an acoustic neuroma. Every patient I had that had that, they stopped using the cell phone and never touched one again. Risk of brain tumor for years since first use, cases most exposed versus cases elsewhere. And once again, we're at almost 3 times the risk at 10 years and more. And the problem with this is, okay, my 2 boys started using cell phones in their early teens. Why? I was a single parent and I wanted to know where they were. And I wasn't being a smart dad. Now, they know not to hold that phone at their head, but both of them still have phones. Do they talk on it like this? No. And they use it mostly for texting because they know what's going on. So let's talk a little bit more about man-made electromagnetic fields, okay? We talked earlier about those low-frequency magnetic fields. Alternating current is made up of both electric and magnetic, generated by live electrical wires and determined by the voltage. Here we run, this is one of the good things, is that in North America we run on 110 or 115. In Europe, okay, and many other countries, they have double that voltage coming in. Actually, your house actually has 240 volts coming in, but it's split into two different wires, and it knocks it down to 120. So actually, in some ways, we're better off here. These things travel a distance of 6 to 8 feet and further, so the only place in a room that's generally completely free of this stuff coming out of the walls is the very center of the room. If you're, like even where I'm standing, and I'm standing, you know, I'm right next to something that's plugged into the wall, okay, and we can actually measure the field coming off that laptop that I'm in at the moment. And these things even exist when the device is not in use. One of the things that we show people when we do a home inspection are the electrical fields coming off their lamps. How many plugs, prongs on the plugs for the lamps in your home? 2 or 3?
Most 2.
2. There are 2 prongs. There is no ground plug on lamps in North America. In Europe, they have 3 prongs. They're all grounded. In North America, we cheaped out. And all electric lamps produce a huge electromagnetic field. And you're sitting in the living room, there's one right beside you, and you're in the bedroom, and there's one on each bedside table. And all of these things are producing nasty, nasty electrical fields, even when they're not on. It's worse when they're on, but even when they're not on. House wiring in ceilings, walls, floors, powers, extension cords, power bars are terrible. Electric blankets, heaven forbid, you sleep with one of those. They're only good for one thing: warm up the bed, turn it off, go to bed. Water beds, they've got a heater, okay, televisions, lamps, clocks, high voltage power lines. Next time you are under a high voltage power line, pick up a fluorescent bulb. This is really interesting to do at night. So you hold that fluorescent bulb up like this, and it will light up. It will actually light up. There's that much electrical energy passing through you. These things emanate from all wires in a house. Most houses are completely full of electric and magnetic fields coming out of the wires. That's one of the things we show people when we actually do a home inspection. This is a book, if you are interested in this, this is a book you must get. It's called Overpowered. It's not too difficult. And it talks about all of this stuff in great detail. Overpowered by Martin Blank, PhD. He's actually a Canadian researcher. I'll let you take a second to write that down.
He's done.
It's the only book called Overpowered, so it's not too hard to remember.
How does that book compare to Disconnect?
Overpowered is, it's about all of these issues. Disconnect is strictly cell phones. She just nailed it on cell phones. That's where she's done all her research. She feels that the cell phone is the single worst thing that has happened, and I think she's got a really good point. But this book is about a number of the different aspects, okay? And then we've got the AC magnetic fields produced by flow of the current, of electrical current, travel through equipment and wiring. More powerful the device, the higher the field. If you use a hair dryer, you have a huge magnetic field. These things come off refrigerators, freezer pumps, freezer compressors, anything that's an electric motor, your blender. All of these things have huge magnetic fields. Now, you don't use these things for very long, so it's maybe not that big an issue, but strangely enough, let's talk about hairdressers. They dry your hair. Where do they hold the dryer? Most of them. Have you ever watched a hairdresser? They hold it like this, right in by the right breast, and they're doing this, and fluffing your hair and brushing it. Okay? Breast cancer, right breast, extremely large numbers of hairdressers after they've been at it for a number of years, because remember I said it's cumulative. Okay? The nice thing about magnetic fields is that they're small. They only come out of the wires 2 to 3 feet. Electrical fields are much bigger. But, and I've measured this, high voltage power lines, these magnetic fields can travel, and I've measured this, up to 600 feet away. And if you're sensitive to this, you can actually feel it when you drive underneath them. I taught my kids how to feel that. They hate me for it now. No, they don't really, but magnetic fields come from all of these things. Literally every gadget in your house has a magnetic field coming off it. Dirty electricity is the harmonic noise, we talked about this a little bit earlier, that's imposed on 60 cycle lines. We measure this with a special meter that measures the actual amount of this that's running on your wires. One of the goals of a home inspection is to get the levels of this dirty electricity down. And when we get those levels down, it almost feels, for most people say, it feels like there's no power running in the walls at all. Because this is what's causing a lot of people to be sick. This is a very, very significant problem. Dimmers, power supplies, smart meters create a lot of this. Many, many things. Your ceiling fan that has a dimmer on it. Dimmers for the lights in your dining room. All of those things cause dirty electricity in very large amounts. Aging electrical in your house. If your house is 30, 40, 50 years old and nobody's ever come in to tighten things up and look at the panel and make sure the wiring is correct, there's corroded wires and that sort of thing, that will all cause lots of dirty electricity. And this is the book you want to read. It's called Dirty Electricity. This is a phenomenal, phenomenal book. It's a short read. It's under 100 pages. And it's essentially the life story of Dr. Sam Milham, who lives just south of Seattle. I'm going to actually go down and see him. And it's a phenomenal book about how electrification has increased the levels of many, many of the diseases that we now have in our society. And that when we electrified everybody's homes, we took on a heck of a challenge. Because how many people are getting sick these days? It's hard to find people that are actually really, really healthy. Until I got throat cancer in 2005, I was the healthiest person I knew. And that was always my goal, was to be the healthiest person I knew. I was a naturopath for crying out loud. I was supposed to be healthy. And then all of a sudden, I got a lump on the side of my neck. That was a kick in the head, let me tell you. So let's look at dirty electricity. On the left, we see that 60 cycles is that nice smooth up and down pattern. And that jagged line that's zipping up and zipping down, that's the actual change in the pattern from a compact fluorescent light bulb. Now, if you still have these in your home, you want to think twice about having them there, because they create huge amounts of dirty electricity. Each compact fluorescent bulb has a little transformer in it that has to change the electrical pattern in order to create the light from that tube. Whether it's a long one or a little spiral one, they're very, very similar, and they all have that little device that creates dirty electricity. On the right, you have the signal created by a good old-fashioned incandescent bulb. Even though it's still artificial light, the incandescent bulb, which is now, by the way, not even going to be available, you can get them for 10 bucks for 12, 40 watts at Canadian Tire. They've still got a bunch left. I bought 6 boxes a few weeks ago, and I'm going to go back and buy another 6, so that I never run out. Well, never say never. Yeah, Canadian Tire still has some they're selling out.
What about LEDs?
Thank you for that question. That's a very important question. LEDs are very interesting. And I have a meter that actually measures light pollution. There's only 5 of these meters in North America. It actually measures the frequency of the light coming off a light bulb. And some LEDs have a really, really clean signal, basically just like the sun. And some have a horribly dirty signal, as bad as a compact fluorescent. And the only way to know, right now I'm compiling a list. I have found 3 that are totally clean. And I'm compiling a list of the bulbs that people can buy that have a really, really healthy signal. And there's 3 or 4 other people that have these meters, and we're slowly working to compile a list. And we'll have a list available for people so they can go into Canadian Tire or Home Depot and they can buy the right bulbs. Because people don't know. And you actually hear of people who say, you know, I don't like the light of that LED bulb. It doesn't feel very good. And it's because it's a really, really dirty signal. So all of these things cause dirty electricity. And the really important one here, which is in all homes built after 2002, is the circuit breakers for the bedroom. Our wonderful government decided we needed special circuit breakers for bedrooms that are similar in a way to the ones for bathrooms, which are those ones with a little breaker in there. So if you drop your hairdryer in a sink full of water, you don't get electrocuted. Now we've got that type of thing in the bedrooms, but these AFCI breakers for bedrooms cause a lot of dirty electricity. Excuse me, it's time to wet my whistle. And the other thing on here that's really important is the smart meters. Smart meters have a power supply that is very, very unique. The reason it's unique is that smart meters run on 240 volts, which is what's coming into the meter. The meters before, that electricity is split off into 2 120 volt feeds into your home. And so the smart meter has a power supply that will produce huge amounts of dirty electricity that are then put onto the wires of your house. And this can actually be measured. Do analog meters do any of that? Anyone got an answer to that question? No, because they don't run on a power supply. Analog meters are strictly mechanical. They aren't powered by anything. So we're going to take a little break from the screen, and I'm going to show you some very interesting things about radio frequency energy. My meter almost ran out of energy here, so I had to charge it up. We've got some of the standard devices that you might have in your home, and we're going to plug them in and make this quite dramatic for you. Does anyone know what that is?
Cordless phone?
I thought somebody might figure that out. That's a cordless phone. And it's not hooked up to a phone line, but it doesn't really matter. It's still going to do. Okay, so. got an interesting rhythm. This is a meter that measures the amount of radio frequency energy coming off of that,
What is that?
okay? And can anyone feel it? Does anyone feel different? Sometimes people can actually feel it. That's the key, you gotta pay attention. Any reading on this meter above 5, and it's measuring in what we call microwatts, okay? Anything above 5 is actually damaging to the body. It's actually been shown by studies, verified scientific studies, to actually cause damage to the DNA and the cellular structures inside your body, as well as your brain. So, I'm going to let you read that. It's very erratic, but it's running around 70 to 90, somewhere in there, and it jumped up over 100 a few times.
It kind of makes my hair stand on.
It makes your hair stand on end, just the sound of it, I know. I can turn the sound down, but the sound actually is a really good thing because you're hearing. It actually makes the radio frequency radiation audible. So you can hear, actually, and each device has a different sound, okay? So I'm just going to set this here and turn it on. By the way, that signal goes way down the block. There we go. That's what I wanted. Okay, this takes a minute or so to boot up. The one with the little rabbit ears on it, who knows what it is?
Is that a wireless router?
Wi-Fi. Is the green light on? Yeah, it's on. Takes a minute to boot up. The problem with Wi-Fi in homes is that most people leave it on all the time. 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365. There it goes. This is what you hear. This is what Wi-Fi sounds like. It has a 16 beat per second signal. Okay? And it's running at 195 or so on that meter at that distance. And a lot of people sit at their desk and that thing is 2 feet away. Okay, it's running up over 200 at that distance. Raziel, would you plug in the other end of this thing? We got one more thing to show you here.
So what's this that you're using to hear that sound?
That is a meter that is designed specifically to measure radio frequency radiation.
Radio frequency.
It comes from Germany, and these are the very best meters available, okay? They measure all the different forms of radio frequency radiation, as well as make it audible. And the reason we use this kind of a meter is when I go into a home, the very first thing that I do is I find the cordless phone and I turn it off. I find the Wi-Fi router and I turn it off. I find any other wireless device that they've got, okay, and turn it off. I'm going to turn it down. It's a little bit loud. Okay, does anyone know what that is?
Some kind of iPod?
No.
iPhone?
Have you got children?
Yes.
How many?
One.
Okay. What would that be if you're a
Baby
parent?
monitor.
Baby monitor, bingo! So Raziel has the baby. Raziel has the baby's end of it. This is the parent's end of it, and it's producing a signal right now of around 250. And the baby's unit back here, which is going to be, I've got to change this, it's really, really high. So it's going to be about this far from the baby, and we're looking at about 2,000.
And 5 is the healthy?
And 5 is healthy. Anything above 5 is damaging. So the interesting thing about the baby monitor is this. On the back of this one is a clip. So you can put it and hang it on your pocket or your belt. And this will run on batteries so that you can go out and be at a party in the backyard and not worry about your baby, because you'll hear the baby if the baby cries. Okay? And the only problem with this whole concept is that the parents are getting severely irradiated and the child is getting cooked as well. And you remember we said that the baby's brain was much more delicate, okay? And so now we have how many children out of 100 in North America being born or developing autism? Right now, it's 4 out of 100, and within the next year, it'll be 5 out of 100, and soon it'll be 6 or 7 or 8 out of 100 are going autistic.
That'll be 1 in 10.
It'll eventually probably get that high before somebody finally says enough.
And in certain cities, it's already close to that high, 1 in 20.
Yeah, in the inner cities, that's correct.
3 autistic children.
So,
My daughter has 3 autistic children.
once again, the safe level is 5. All of these devices were pushing 200, or in some cases, the poorer child's was upwards of 2,000. And this is what's happening in everybody's home right now. Okay? Cell phones are also hugely, I'm not going to demonstrate one because they're hugely damaging to the body over long periods of time. We're going to talk a little bit about the smart meter, because the smart meter actually has a cell phone inside it. I know that sounds crazy, but it's not like you can dial that phone. But there is a module inside the smart meter. It's about the size of a small cell phone that transmits the signal. Okay, so we're going to talk about the good and the bad and the ugly. And the fact that they are sticking something on the side of your house without your permission that is going to be transmitting a signal every 2 minutes. And that signal is going to blast out through your house, to your neighbors, and if somebody happens to be just on the other side of that wall, that signal is so strong, okay? And it's easily as strong as that baby monitor.
Well, I have a hunch they have them in my little old apartment now.
Yeah.
And in the laundry. So,
It could be. It absolutely could be. But we're protected from cigarette smokers. I mean, if I wanted to light up right now, would anyone here complain? Of course you would. You leave. Yeah, because, right? I mean, we're totally protected. You can't smoke in bars. You can't smoke in restaurants. You want to smoke at the airport. You go to this little room and smoke with a bunch of other people. You know, and people get to peer in at you. Okay? So who's going to protect us from this? Well, Safety Code 6. This is a very interesting government code. Okay? And they only rely on the ability of the device to actually heat you up. Now, I actually remember when I used to use a cell phone and the side of my head would get hot. I wasn't being very smart. I'm paying for it now. I have an acrylic lens in this eye. The thousands of studies are showing there is significant damage from non-thermal effects. That means effects on the cells that do not create any heat, that people cannot feel. You can smell cigarette smoke, but you can't feel this, and that's why it's so dangerous. And the unfortunate part is, if you look at this chart, okay, these are all the levels at which we're seeing health challenges in here. Okay? Memory challenges, leukemias, altered blood cell challenges, childhood leukemias, decreased cell growth, all of these areas here. And look at the levels. This is where Canada is in the green level here. This is where Canada has set the safety levels. Okay? So, if we take this line across, that safety level, the top of that safety level, is way, way above where childhood leukemias are already being caused in our children. I mean, this is extremely, extremely serious. A few countries like Italy, China, okay, and some of the Eastern European countries here, Russia, they have actually got significantly lower levels. Okay, New Zealand is here, but Australia, Canada, Japan, USA up here, the United Kingdom is even worse. So does it make any sense to have these levels way above what science has shown is actually a problem, a significant problem? It makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, Western Alliance countries are the worst. They are the absolute worst, and we're one of them. The World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer announced it was classifying this as a possibly carcinogenic to humans, a class 2B carcinogen, and advised the public to adopt safety measures. Well, guess what? A Swedish review strengthens the grounds for now changing that to call it a class 2A, which means that it is a probable, not possible, it's a probable human carcinogen. Has anyone ever read what it says on a cigarette pack? Next time you see a cigarette pack in a store, read what it says on there. They've got all kinds of interesting warnings on cigarette packs. Because it's an actual carcinogen. It's not just possible or probable, it's an actual carcinogen. And that's where this is going to. It's going to take a while. Dr. Davis was one of the people that was involved in this review. She's the one that wrote that book called Disconnect. The precautionary principle is very, very simple. It means that if there's a possibility that something is harmful, we shouldn't be doing it until it's absolutely proven to be safe. And as I said earlier, we are in the biggest science experiment mankind has ever partaken in. Better safe than sorry. Okay? An ounce of prevention. We've all heard that one. It's easier to stay out of trouble than to get out of trouble. That's the precautionary principle, and we are not using it in regards to this particular technology. And here we are. What kind of cell phone does your doctor use? Most likely an iPhone. Doctors seem to like iPhones. Not sure why, but the iPhones, most doctors. And all of these devices have the same type of energy. The Bioinitiative report is something you can read if you have the internet, and it's showing incredible damage from all of this technology. DNA breakage, stress proteins in the cell, that's cellular distress. Gene expression changes, what does that mean? That means birth defects. That means we are actually altering the genetic code of our race by exposing people's reproductive organs to this energy before they conceive a child. And we are already now seeing what's going on with children that are being born, and the amazing amount of infertility. Sleep, cognitive function, and performance problems, blood-brain barrier alterations. Our brain has a barrier that prevents it from getting toxic. That barrier is called the blood-brain barrier, and it was designed for one thing, to protect the brain cells from the toxins that are in our systems. Unfortunately, these days, we are extremely toxic compared to what we were 100 or 200 years ago, because we've got hundreds of thousands of toxins in our environment that we aren't designed for. The big problem is that that barrier that prevents those toxins from getting into the brain is damaged by using a cell phone, and allows the toxins into the brain. They think this is why we now have 13 to 15 times as much brain cancer as we had 20 years ago. And brain cancer is almost always terminal. You rarely survive it. Because once the brain has gotten to the formation of cancer, the whole brain is actually at the state where it can spread through the brain very, very quickly, and I've never seen anybody survive it. Neurobehavior effects. These are personality changes. Anything from road rage to depression to anxiety, all of these things are aggravated by the use of these technologies. And we have an epidemic of attention deficit disorder and hyperactive disorder in our children right now. And yes, a lot of it is the crappy food and the diet and the sugar and all that, but this is compounding all of those things. So the Bioinitiative report is something you can see at bioinitiative.org. You might want to write that down, because it's something that, if you're interested in this, you should be looking at. Smart meters create a wireless grid that accumulates information and can be controlled by the utility. Smart appliances can talk to the utility and relay time-sensitive information used to collect data for utility companies. There are not just smart electric meters, they are now putting in gas and water meters that are smart as well, that also produce radio frequency signals. They use a pulsed high-frequency radio frequency, and they have that power supply, the SMPS power supply, that creates dirty electricity. So a lot of people are concerned about the smart meter and its radio frequency radiation, but they don't know that that smart meter also creates huge amounts of dirty electricity. The switch mode power supply uses extremely high frequency shifting of electrical currents, and those currents go back on your wires. I took this directly off the BC Hydro website. They talk about this, and this is very interesting. Okay? The term harmonics refers to a distortion of the normally smooth utility power. Harmonics are actually higher frequency voltages and currents, and when added to the utility power, produce a distortion of the normal voltage or current waveform. Usually harmonic distortion must be present continuously to have an adverse effect on the power system. This is directly off the BC Hydro website. And this is what BC Hydro is putting on the walls of millions of people in British Columbia. Is a device that does exactly this. Something they are actually saying isn't very good for us. And they're putting it on our walls, and they're creating it in our homes. They say it's only created by computer equipment, adjustable speed motor drives, consumer electronics, electronic lighting ballasts, welders, and battery chargers. I put the smart meters on there because the smart meters also have the same exact kind of power supply and do exactly the same thing as all these other things that BC Hydro says aren't probably very good for us. In addition to that, spending $1 billion will save us money. Does anyone believe that? Smart meters increase bills 80% of the time. My next door neighbor in West Kelowna in July of 2012 had a hydro bill half of his bill in August of 2012 after his smart meter went in.
I've heard that before.
It doubled. And he went out immediately and he bought all smart appliances. and he put in all compact fluorescent bulbs. And his hydro bill went down $5 a month. So his hydro bill was still up almost double. And I said to him, Joe, aren't you going to do something about this? And he said to me, what am I going to do? It's the power company. That was his reply. So this has been seen right across the country, everywhere they put in smart meters. This is an absolute cash cow for the hydro companies. Let's follow the money. Why are we paying 2 to 3 times more for smart meter than other places like Quebec for the same exact meters? The lifespan of smart meters is about half what BC Hydro has said it is, which means we are going to be paying huge amounts of money in the future to maintain this whole smart meter grid. And the major issues are accountability and lack of democracy. You don't have a choice. They just simply come and put it on your wall. And they now, by the way, know when you turn your hairdryer on. They know when you have your TV on. They know when you're not at home.
They all have different power signatures.
Exactly. They can read everything you're doing. They cause fires, property damage, and they are not safe, and there are huge health concerns. I took this picture last fall. Gee, what do you think caused the fire? Could it possibly have been the smart meter? Yes, it was the smart meter. It was quite obvious. It took her 6 months to get the fire inspector to admit that it was the smart meter. He didn't want to do it.
Was that in British Columbia?
No, this was this side of Vernon on West Side Road, on the reserve there. Yeah. And the house was destroyed. They initially thought they were going to try and save the house, but then they decided they had to tear it down. Smart meters are 160 times more powerful than cell phones. They will transmit for over 30 miles. The readings we're getting off smart meters is absolutely huge. But for some people, the primary issue relates to privacy. For others, it is their very right to live in a healthy environment. Governments may determine, for example, that it's too risky to have citizens off the grid, detached from the technological ecosystem. To be sure, in the future, as now, there will be people who resist adopting and using technology, people who want nothing to do with virtual profiles, online data systems, or smartphones. Yet a government might suspect that people who opt out completely have something to hide and are thus more likely to break laws. And as a counterterrorism measure, that government will build a kind of hidden people registry. You might also be subjected to a strict set of new regulations that includes rigorous airport screening or even travel restrictions. Now, some of you might say this is a little bit conspiracy theorist, but I don't think so. This is actually where things are going. You will not be able to hide or be at all obscure from the government. You just tossed a jar of peanut butter in your grocery cart when your smartphone buzzes. You glance down the screen to see a message that seems almost clairvoyant. Would you like to buy some jelly? Get $1 off. This technology is already in place in stores in the United States. They know you're in the store, they know what you're buying, and they actually know the aisles that you're walking in. And they will target you and try to sell you other things. Convenient, certainly. Creepy, maybe. This is one vision for indoor positioning. This technology is actually there. These are the known exposure effects of electromagnetic pollution. This is in the brochure, so you don't need to write any of this down. Just grab a brochure on your way out. This is directly out of my brochure. The reason I put the eyes at the top is because that's the one that so many people are actually having. Visual challenges, cataracts, floaters, changes in vision, okay? fuzzy vision, needing to get their glasses changed every 6 months because their vision is moving around from one way to the other. The eyes are one of the first things to start telling people that they've got challenges. Indeed, these symptoms are very consistent with the experience of electrosensitive persons. People who are electrosensitive will tell you all of the crazy things that they have, that they feel in their bodies. And even things that are visible, like skin rashes. Fortunately, if one removes oneself from the source of the EMF exposures, and that's the goal of what we're trying to do for people, is get them out of this and get them protected. Get their homes protected and get their children and their grandchildren protected. These difficulties can greatly improve or completely disappear if addressed early, but the long-term effects from significant exposure, even if one has completely insulated oneself from RF exposures of all kinds going forward, are still unknown. So we don't know if there's permanent damage, but the people doing the science on this suspect that that is the case. All public health officials should be alert to the indications for an EMF Alzheimer's connection. We now have an epidemic of Alzheimer's disease. And the numbers are getting astronomical. The stress on our healthcare system is already significant. This would include lowering EMF exposure guidelines to levels that do not have the predictable effects on brain imaging and blood work described above. They now have Wi-Fi in all of the retirement residences in Canada. Why? People want it. And it's throughout the residences, and it's 24/7. Remember we said that? Alzheimer's is going up exponentially, and it's going to be one of the biggest health challenges we've ever had. And there are significant connections in the scientific community between radio frequency and Alzheimer's. Okay, and I suspect also it's not just radio frequency, that the other forms of EMF are a challenge. One cannot help but wonder what impact modern technologies have had on the incidence of Alzheimer's and for how long. And also what the incidence of Alzheimer's has been in indigenous cultures. They don't have Alzheimer's in the jungles of Borneo. It's non-existent. It's a disease of modern civilization. And once again, it's after 10 years. It's after 10 years and heavy use that we are seeing the problems. This is a fellow you should study up. I'm not going to talk much about him, but he's one of the most famous neuroscientists who's doing work on this. Dr. Ole Johansson, you can see him on YouTube. He's got lots of excellent, excellent video presentations. Got it? Excellent. And a thalidomide in the making. Does anyone here remember thalidomide?
Of course.
I lived in the States at the time. We were down there for 10 years. And there were a number of kids in the school that I went to who had arms that were this long and, you know, missing fingers. Yeah. I just thank the Lord that my mother didn't take thalidomide. And that's probably what we're looking at here, a thalidomide in the making. So what can you do? Protect your analog, lock it up. Get the strategies that we've got available. Roselle at the back, talk to her about that. Shield your existing smart meter. If you have one, get a shield for it so that it's not producing all of those radio frequency radiations that are coming into your house. Communicate with your hydro company and say no. Just say no. People need to stand up. Be informed, stay connected through email. Get on stopsmartmetersbc.ca. Get on C4ST. These are websites for learning about this and learning how to protect yourself. There are lots of people doing this. You are not alone. Be informed, stay connected. Get a professional evaluation on all your forms of EMF. Protect yourself, your family, and friends to the best of your abilities. And the reason I say that is because it's cumulative. And it's up to every one of us to protect ourselves and our families as much as we possibly can. I've had people sell their homes and move because they were too close to a cell tower. I just said to them, we can spend, you know, $10,000 shielding your home, but the cell tower is still there and you can't go out in your yard. Sell your home and move. I've actually had people do that. Stand up for your rights. Have you ever heard the expression, if you ignore your rights, they will go away? And go on wireless. I showed you what all the wireless does. You can go on wireless. Safe sleep is sacred. Sleep time is when we heal and regenerate. Protect your sleeping areas from all forms. One of the things we pay special attention to in a home inspection is exactly that, the sleeping space. We analyze it for radio frequency, we analyze it for electric, magnetic fields, body voltage, all of those things that I talked about. We get people rigged up in some cases with bed canopies that protect them from all forms of electromagnetic radiation while they sleep. And did you know that for those of you who have trouble sleeping, researchers say that 1 week of camping without electronics resets our biological body clock and synchronizes our melatonin hormones with sunrise and sunset. And you can throw away your sleeping pills. And this is